The tea house went silent the moment the cup shattered. Hot tea spread across the wooden floor like blood from a wound, and the young samurai stood frozen, his hand still trembling in the air where the cup had been. Across from him, the older man, a stranger he had spoken to for less than a minute, wiped a single drop from his sleeve and said nothing. That silence was worse than any insult. The young samurai's name was Soetsu. He was 23 years old, the son of a respected sword instructor, and in the last 40 seconds he had lost something he would spend years trying to find again. It had started over nothing. A comment about his posture. A small remark, half a joke, made by the older traveler sitting near the lantern. Soetsu had laughed at first. Then his face had grown hot. Then his hand had moved before his mind did. And the cup had flown. And now every man in the tea house was looking at the floor instead of at him, which was its own kind of judgment. Here is the truth no one tells a young man with a sword at his hip. The man who can be moved by words can be moved by anything. And the man who can be moved by anything will never, in his entire life, belong to himself. The man who could not stop shaking. Soetsu walked out into the rain. He did not remember bowing. He did not remember paying. He remembered only the older traveler's eyes, calm, almost bored, as if he had seen this exact scene 100 times in 100 different tea houses, and already knew how the rest of Soetsu's life would go. The road back to his father's dojo was 3 hours on foot. Soetsu walked it in silence, the rain soaking through his robe. His jaw locked so tight his teeth ached. He was not angry at the traveler anymore. He was angry at his own hand, at the way it had moved without permission, at the way a single sentence from a stranger had reached inside his chest and pulled a string, and his whole body had jumped like a puppet. He thought of his father's words from years ago, words he had not understood at the time. A blade that moves when the wind blows is not a blade. It is a leaf. Halfway home, the rain stopped. Soetsu came to a small wooden bridge over a stream swollen with rain, and he stopped in the middle of it because his legs would not carry him further. He gripped the railing. He stared down at the water. And for the first time in his life, he understood that he was a coward. Not the kind of coward who runs from a fight. He had never run from a fight. And he was the other kind. The kind who runs into a fight to escape something inside himself. The kind who reaches for his sword, because he cannot bear to sit still inside his own skin for one more second. It was on that bridge that he first heard the name. 2 travelers passed behind him, speaking low, and one of them said it almost in a whisper, "Musashi." The other man hushed him, the way men hush each other when they speak of something dangerous. Soetsu did not turn around. He only caught the fragments. A duel near the coast. A man killed without the sword being drawn twice. A swordsman who, they said, had not been touched by an opponent in over 30 years. And something else. Something stranger than the killings. They say he no longer becomes angry. Not even when insulted. Not even when struck. Soetsu stood very still on the bridge. He had heard of Miyamoto Musashi the way every young swordsman had heard of him. As a legend, a shadow, a name spoken to frighten students into practicing harder. But he had never heard him described that way before. Not as the strongest, not as the fastest, as the man who could not be reached. The travelers walked on, their voices faded into the trees. Soetsu remained on the bridge for a long time, watching the water move, thinking about the cup, thinking about his hand. And a question began to form inside him, a question that would, in time, take him further from home than he had ever planned to go. What would it feel like, he wondered, to sit across from a stranger and hear any word, any insult, any laugh, and feel nothing move inside the chest at all? Not pretend not to feel it, not swallow it, not hide it behind a polite face while the blood roared in the ears. To actually not be moved, to be a man the world could not reach. He did not know yet that such a man existed. He did not know yet that he would meet him. He only knew, standing on that bridge with the rain dripping from his hair, that the life he had been living until that morning was over, and that whatever came next would either make him into something harder than steel, or break him completely. He walked the rest of the way home in the dark. When he reached the dojo, his father was still awake, sitting alone in the practice hall with a single lantern burning beside him. The old man looked up as Soetsu entered. He looked at his son's wet robe. He looked at his son's face. And without asking a single question, he said, "Who moved you today?" Soetsu opened his mouth to answer, and realized he did not know how. The lesson of the still water. His father did not let him sleep that night. The old man rose from his cushion, took a lantern in his hand, and walked past his son into the forest behind the dojo. Soetsu followed because there was nothing else to do. They stopped at the edge of a small pond Soetsu had not known was there. The water was black and perfectly still. "Throw a stone into the water," his father said. Soetsu obeyed. The water broke. Ripples spread outward, distorting the lantern's reflection. "Now wait!" Within a minute, the surface was still again, as though no stone had ever fallen. The pond did not become angry at the stone, his father said. It did not chase it. It did not punish it. It received the stone, and it returned to itself. Today, a stranger threw a stone into you, and you are still rippling. Soetsu felt the heat rise in his face, and hated himself for it, because the rising heat proved his father right in the same instant the words were spoken. "Father, teach me to be still." The old man shook his head. "I cannot teach you that. Stillness is not knowledge. It is what is left when a man has burned away everything inside him that flinches. Tomorrow you leave. You will not return until the pond inside you is as still as the pond before us." Soetsu left the next morning with one sword, a thin blanket, and the name of an old monk 3 provinces away. The journey took 11 days. When he finally reached the hut, the monk looked at his swollen feet and his proud shoulders and said only, "You walked all this way carrying yourself. No wonder you are tired." Then he closed the door. Soetsu slept on the ground that night, and the next. On the 4th morning, the monk handed him a wooden bucket and pointed to a stream at the bottom of the mountain. Soetsu carried water up that mountain every day for 2 months without being told why. His shoulders grew strong. His pride did not. The day his pride finally cracked, it cracked over something small. A peasant boy on the path laughed at him as he passed, a short, mocking child's laugh, and Soetsu felt his hand twitch toward his sword before he even knew what was happening. A child, and his hand had moved. He set the bucket down. He sat beside it on the path, and for a long time he did not move. He understood now. He had not been insulted by the boy. He had been insulted by the boy 1,000 times in advance, not by his own mind. He carried the insult inside him already, fully formed, and any small spark from the outside world was enough to light it. The world was not the problem. He was the kindling. When he climbed back up that evening, the monk was waiting at the door. He looked at Soetsu's face and nodded once. "Tonight, I will tell you about a man named Musashi." Soetsu went very still. "You have heard the name," the monk said. It was not a question. "On a bridge, in the rain. Then you have heard the legend. Tonight you will hear the truth, which is smaller and harder. Sit." Soetsu sat. Musashi was not born unmoved. This is the lie the legends tell. He was a violent boy with a violent father. By 13 he had killed a grown man in a duel. By 20 he had begun to understand something that most swordsmen never understand in their entire lives. The monk's voice dropped. He understood that every man he killed in anger was a man who had defeated him, even as he stood over the body. The dead man had reached inside him and pulled the string, and his arm had moved. And that was a kind of slavery the dead man won in the moment of his own death. Soetsu's mouth was dry. Musashi later wrote, "Do nothing that is of no use." Most men hear those words and think of wasted hours. They do not understand that the deepest uselessness is the anger that rises in a man's chest at a word, at a glance, at a laugh from a stranger on a road. It changes nothing. It only proves to the world that the man can be moved. The lantern light caught the edges of the monk's face. Musashi fought over 60 duels and lost none. But the duels he won at the end of his life were won before the sword was drawn. They were won in a place inside him so quiet that no opponent could find it. And what cannot be found cannot be cut. The monk stood. "You will meet him, not by my arrangement, by the arrangement of the road you have already chosen. Sleep." Soetsu did not sleep. In the morning, the monk did not give him a bucket. He gave him a road. 3 months later, in a village whose name Soetsu would never afterward speak aloud, he saw the man for the first time, sitting alone outside an inn at dusk, eating a bowl of rice with a wooden sword leaning against the wall beside him. Soetsu did not need to be told who it was. The whole village seemed to be holding its breath around him. Men passed without looking. A dog crossed the road to avoid the bench, and the man eating the rice did not look up. Not at the dog, not at the men, not at the young samurai standing frozen at the edge of the square. Musashi finished his rice. He set the bowl down, and then, without lifting his eyes, he spoke across the dust of the empty square. "You have been standing there long enough. Come closer, or keep walking. But do not stand in the road carrying a question you are afraid to ask." The man the world could not reach. Soetsu's legs carried him across the square before his mind agreed to move. He stopped 3 paces from the bench, close enough to be heard, far enough to draw if it came to that. He realized with a slow shame that he had measured the distance out of habit, and that the man on the bench had almost certainly noticed. Musashi did not look up. He was older than Soetsu had imagined. The hair at his temples was streaked with gray. There was a long, thin scar on the back of his right hand. His robe was worn at the elbows. He looked in every visible way, like an ordinary tired traveler at the end of a long road, except for the stillness. It was the stillness Soetsu had seen in the pond behind his father's dojo. The same depth, the same refusal to ripple. A man does not learn that kind of quiet in a year, or in 10. It is something a man becomes, the way a stone becomes smooth in a river, slowly, without trying, by being struck again and refusing to break. "Sit," Musashi said. Soetsu sat on the ground at the edge of the bench. He did not know why he sat on the ground instead of beside the man. His body had simply chosen. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Musashi said, "What is the question?" Soetsu opened his mouth, closed it. He had rehearsed a dozen versions of the question on the road. Each one sounded foolish now in the presence of the man he had come to ask. Finally, he said simply, "How do I stop being moved?" Musashi was quiet for a long time. When he answered, he did not look at Soetsu. He looked at the road. "You are asking the wrong question. You ask how to stop being moved, as if there is a technique, a stance, a breath you can practice until the world cannot reach you. There is no such technique." Soetsu's chest tightened. "Then it cannot be done." "It can be done, but not the way you are trying to do it." Musashi turned his head slowly. For the first time, his eyes met Soetsu's. They were not hard eyes, they were not cold. They were simply present, the way a still pond is present, reflecting everything and holding nothing. "A man is moved by an insult," Musashi said, "because the insult touches something he believes about himself. If a stranger calls you a coward and the word burns, it is because somewhere inside you, you are not yet sure you are not one. The word found a door. You built the door. You put the lock on it. And then you became furious that someone knocked." Soetsu felt the words land in his stomach like a slow stone. A man with no door cannot be entered. A man who has looked at every part of himself and accepted what is there has nothing left to defend. When such a man is insulted, the words pass through him like wind through an empty house. There is no one inside to be wounded. He looked back at the road. "I did not learn this from a master. I learned it by losing. I learned it by killing men I did not need to kill. I learned it by waking, year after year, in the same skin, with the same fire, and slowly understanding that the fire was not given to me by my enemies. It was already there. They only handed me the match." Soetsu did not move. He thought of the cup in the tea house, the traveler's calm eyes, the boy on the mountain path. He thought of every time in his life he had told himself that someone else had made him angry. And he understood, with a clarity that almost hurt, that this had never once been true. "Stand up," Musashi said. Soetsu stood. "Now I am going to insult you. I do not know you. I do not care about you. The words will be empty. But I want you to listen to where they land inside you. Do not answer. Do not move. Only listen." And Musashi spoke. He spoke quietly, almost gently. He named things in Soetsu, fears, vanities, small cowardices, that he could not possibly have known and yet seemed to know anyway, the way an old swordsman knows where a young swordsman will leave himself open. He spoke of the cup. He spoke of the bridge. He spoke of the boy on the path. He spoke of the father who had sent him away, and the pride that had carried him up a mountain, and the secret hope that he would return one day as someone worth being feared. Soetsu stood in the dust and let the words come. Some of them burned. Some of them passed through him like nothing. And somewhere in the middle of it, something he had been holding for 23 years, without knowing he was holding it, began, very slowly, to set itself down. when Musashi stopped speaking. The square was silent. Soetsu's hands were open at his sides. His breath was even. He felt, for the first time he could remember, no impulse to move toward his sword, no impulse to defend, no impulse to explain himself. He only stood. "Now you understand," Musashi said. It was never the words. It was what the words touched. Remove what they touch, and 1,000 men can shout at you in the street, and you will pass among them like a man walking through rain. He picked up his wooden sword. He stood. He was shorter than Soetsu had imagined. "I will give you one thing more, and then I will go. Think lightly of yourself, and deeply of the world." Most men do the opposite. They think their honor is heavy and the world is light, and so every small word weighs upon them like a stone. Reverse it. Let the world be heavy. Let yourself be light. A light thing cannot be broken by what falls on it. It only moves aside and returns. He looked at Soetsu one more time. "You will not see me again. Do not look. The lesson is not in me. It was never in me. It is in the pond behind your father's dojo, which you have already seen. Go home." He walked past Soetsu without another word, and down the road and around the bend, and was gone. Soetsu stood in the square for a long time. Then he turned and began the long walk home. It took him many weeks. He was not in a hurry. Along the way, men spoke to him, and some spoke kindly, and some spoke cruelly. And he noticed something strange. The cruel words no longer found anywhere to land. They struck the surface of him and slid off, the way rain slides off a stone. He did not have to make himself calm. The calm was simply there, and in the absence of all the small hooks he had spent his life sharpening on the inside of his own chest. He understood finally what his father had meant. A blade that moves when the wind blows is not a blade. It is a leaf. When he reached the dojo, his father was sitting in the practice hall with a single lantern beside him, exactly as he had been on the night Soetsu had left. The old man looked up. He looked at his son's face for a long moment. He did not ask who had moved him. He only nodded once and gestured for his son to sit beside him. Soetsu sat. And in the quiet of the practice hall, with the lantern burning low between them, he understood the last thing. The thing no master had told him, because no master can. The man the world cannot reach is not a man who has built a wall. He is a man who has stopped building the door